This offseason has been a story of highs and lows for the Notre Dame football program, but what were the most important things that happened over the past several months? Plus, what's the latest on Deuce Knight? That's all coming right up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Friday, August 9th, so happy Friday. You made it, and thank you for getting a head start on your weekend by making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and as always, you can watch a full show on YouTube or you can listen wherever you get your podcast. For those of you watching on YouTube, this is a reminder to please like the video, subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening to the podcast, you like what you hear, please rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, the Friday mailbag is back. I was actually supposed to do one last week, but then all hell broke loose after it was reported that Notre Dame's top prospect in the class of 2025, 4-star quarterback Deuce Knight, visited Auburn and Ole Miss. But now I'm back and I'm ready to answer your questions. I've got a lot of good ones to get to. Thanks as always to everyone who submitted theirs, and I'll try to get to as many as I can. And yes, we are going to talk about Deuce Knight. But let's get to our first question, which is actually really good this time of year. Ricardo Caliente asked, let's say we've been in more of an Olympic mood this summer. Can you give us a 3-point stance breakdown of the summer news stories with Irish football? What has changed since spring ball? What do we need to know before Texas A&M? I like this question because I have noticed, I've seen the numbers, that a lot of you are tuning in again after maybe, taking some time away from the Notre Dame football program, or some people just who have not been listening every single day. And for those of you who have been, I really appreciate you for joining me along this ride every day throughout this offseason. It has been a ride, to say the least, but there are a lot of people now who are getting back into football, and they want to catch up on everything that's happened over the summer for Notre Dame. So if we look at the offseason as a whole, the winner was actually really good to Notre Dame. They replaced Jared Parker with Mike Denbrock as the offensive coordinator. Huge win there. They signed defensive coordinator Al Golden to a long-term extension after there was some thought that maybe he might leave to take a head coaching job elsewhere. So they locked up 2 of the best coordinators in all of college football for the next 4 years, and they added some really good players in the transfer portal. They definitely improved in the portal. Yes, they did lose some guys, but they got better players than the ones that they lost. But as for the spring and summer, I think first thing that really stands out to me is the Goog 2.0. Notre Dame broke ground on a brand new, state-of-the-art, 9-figure football facility on campus. And technically, this happened at the very end of spring ball, so it wasn't technically in the summer, but still, this is very important. I think some people missed it. Now, granted, it won't be ready for a couple years. The new football facility is not going to have any bearing on what happens to Notre Dame this upcoming season. But as for the future of the program, this is huge. It was long overdue. Honestly, it's part of the reason why Brian Kelly left Notre Dame to join LSU. I don't think he was very happy with the plans or the speed in which they were going to build these new grounds. And then he was very impressed with everything that was down there in LSU. You've heard it by now, I'm sure. But Notre Dame desperately needed new football facilities. And no, it's not like there were players coming to Notre Dame just because of facilities, or they weren't coming to Notre Dame because of the Goog or anything like that. But still, if you want to compete at the top of college football, you need a really good facility. Notre Dame's facility was outdated. The weight room was fine, but they didn't have enough rooms to support all the staff and the players. Some of the guys would have to do homework in the hallways. Like, it just wasn't a good situation, and that is not what you want to show recruits, is like, oh, this is the football facility. This is what we have for your players. The new facility is going to be great. It's state-of-the-art. It's really exciting. It was actually part of the pitch when Notre Dame added Lauren Lando to be the strength and conditioning coach, which I guess we can add in the offseason moves. So that was really big. That is really important, but it doesn't have as much to do with this season. As for this season, Notre Dame got some good news on the injury front. Riley Leonard, Benjamin Morris, and Mitchell Evans all recovered from their surgeries, and they looked ready to go at the start of preseason camp. Riley Leonard was a little bit more likely to be ready to go because he just had a couple acute ankle surgeries at the beginning of the year. Benjamin Morrison, his health was really up in the air because he suffered a shoulder injury during spring practice, underwent major surgery there. We didn't know when he was going to be back. He's been ready to go in camp. He's going to be playing against Texas A&M. That's huge. And then Mitchell Evans was recovering from the torn ACL that he suffered against Pittsburgh at the end of last year. And it seemed like his recovery was positive, but now that we've seen him in camp, I think that is a huge development. But on the other side of that, Notre Dame lost Charles Jagasaw, their starting left tackle, for the season. Before the season even really started, he tore his ACL last Saturday. So some mostly good news on the injury front, but obviously some bad news there with Charles Jagasaw. Last major thing that happened over the course of the summer on the recruiting trail, Notre Dame's class of 2025 went from being almost a lock to finish in the top 5 to one that almost certainly is going to finish outside of the top 10. They did have the number 1 ranked class at the start of the summer, which has become basically a tradition now for Notre Dame because they like to get commitments from their guys early on. They had way more commitments than everyone else, and they had some really good players in the class. Then they added 3 elite defensive backs in the spring and summer and 4-star cornerback Dallas Golden, 4-star corner Mark Zachary, and 4-star safety Jaden Blair to go along with 5-star safety Ivan Taylor. It looked like it could be maybe the greatest class of defensive backs that Notre Dame would ever sign. It was looking really good for the class as a whole. Notre Dame had a couple of really big-time players on campus in June, some guys like Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng and Matt Framo, 2 elite linebackers. At one point, it felt like their commitments were inevitable. That still hasn't happened. Now, I'm not saying Notre Dame is out of it by any stretch. They could end up landing one or both of those guys, but it seems like all of the momentum they had has sort of cooled off a little bit, but we'll see what happens there. And then Notre Dame lost their top-ranked defensive prospect, Ivan Taylor. He flipped his commitment to Michigan almost immediately after Jaden Blair committed, and some people think that those two are related. I honestly don't know. I think it has more to do with the fact that Notre Dame lost safeties coach Chris O'Leary to the Los Angeles Chargers. O'Leary was very important in that recruitment, so I think that is the main reason why Ivan Taylor flipped. And then that sort of started a domino effect, or maybe not a domino effect because I don't think they're all related, but really it started the first wave of bad news for Notre Dame on the recruiting trail because then Notre Dame went 0 for 3 on their top wide receiver prospects in this class. The real 2 main ones were Derek Meadows out of Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas and Dylan Robinson out of Southern California. Notre Dame really thought they had a good chance at landing both those guys. They didn't get either. Meadows picked LSU. Robinson is going to Washington. And it felt like Derek Meadows, he's a 5-star. He felt like a guy that Notre Dame actually had a realistic chance of landing because they were on him early before everyone else sort of started going after him. But in the end, they came up short, and that was a really tough blow. And now it looks like Deuce Knight, the top-ranked player, the quarterback, the leader, the star of this class, is going to flip to Auburn. And that leads me to my next question from @T_Meeson. Is there any hope Deuce Knight remains committed to Notre Dame? If not, what's the backup plan at quarterback in the class of 2025? So this week, it felt all but certain that Deuce was going to flip to Auburn. I honestly still think that is what's going to happen, but the fact he hasn't done it yet is a good thing for Notre Dame. I know that Tom Loy from 24/7 Sports reported last night that Notre Dame is doing everything they possibly can to keep him. They actually feel a little bit better now than they did a few days ago. I don't really know what that means because I also know that Auburn feels very confident that they are going to get Deuce Knight to flip in the near future. The one thing that I will say is that the longer this goes on, where Deuce does not flip his commitment, I think it's actually better for Notre Dame, which is rare. Usually you say, oh, the more recruit sort of drags their commitment on, it seems like they're less likely to go to Notre Dame. But I think that Auburn came in really hot. They got him on campus for one of their biggest recruiting weekends of the year. They had a ton of momentum. They got like 7 commits in the span of 4 days or something crazy like that. So if this can go longer, and then Deuce has more time to think about Notre Dame and all the reasons why he committed there in the first place and all the reasons why he was recruiting other prospects in his class so hard to come to Notre Dame, I think that bodes well for the Irish. Again, I still think that Deuce Knight is going to end up at Auburn, but Notre Dame needs to do everything they can. It looks like they are because Deuce Knight is a really, really good player, and his potential is through the roof, to be honest with you. Yes, he is still developmental as a passer. Yes, there are certainly concerns about his game, and by no means is Deuce Knight a lock to be a great quarterback, but he has the tools to be really, really great, and considering what Notre Dame has invested in him, they really are going to continue to try to keep him in this class. And I have seen some comments from fans lately that, frankly, I just do not understand. Maybe, let me rephrase it. I understand why fans are saying it, but it's just the wrong take, okay? So there are some Notre Dame fans out there who are like, oh, I've had enough of this Deuce Knight drama. I don't even want him anymore. Notre Dame should move on. They should revoke his scholarship, all of that. Just stop, please. This is big boy recruiting, okay? If you want to recruit at the top of college football, if you want to field the best team every single year, if you want to field a team like Georgia, like Alabama, like Ohio State, you've got to get in the mud. You've got to get in these type of recruitments. You've got to deal with all kinds of nonsense going on from the outside, because that is what it takes to land the prospects that everyone in the entire country wants, okay? Like all these people wanted Notre Dame to start landing 5-star prospects and just expected it to be easy once they hired Marcus Freeman. That ain't the case. This is how recruiting is. This is how it's always been. Notre Dame just hasn't really been in the mix for a lot of these top prospects, especially guys in the South like Deuce Knight. Well, welcome to recruiting in the land of the SEC. It's not a whole lot of fun. I totally agree with you that this drama is not fun to consume as a fan, but it's just part of the deal. Like, you think Nick Saban got to the level that he got, especially as a recruiter, by being stubborn? Like, if he didn't like the way that a recruit was dealing with his process, or he didn't like the family or all the other nonsense that was going on behind the scenes, you think he would just stop recruiting the player if he thought he was really good? No. He did not do that. He had to deal with the stuff every single year in the SEC, and that's a big reason why he became the coach that he was, because he won way more battles than he lost in that respect. Notre Dame hasn't won any, like, at all. They lost Keon Keeley. They lost Peyton Bowen. Like, the only way you're going to start winning them is by being involved in them in the first place. And it looks like Notre Dame is going to lose out on this again, but I do not fault them at all for trying and continuing to try, despite the fact that he's now looking elsewhere. And I understand that fans want to live in a world where the top prospects, every commit who picks Notre Dame is all in on Notre Dame and believes it for everything that you believe it. I get that. You know, I want that as well, but it's just not reality. These are 17-year-old kids who are really, really good at football and have all these people in their ear, and they're offering them tons of money and all kinds of stuff that, frankly, most of us have never, ever encountered in our life and never will encounter, because we were not a 5-star prospect when we were coming out of high school. So it actually kind of reminds me of Cavs fans when LeBron was there, especially, at the end of both his stints with the Cavs. And look, just to be clear, I'm a big LeBron guy. I love him for what he did for the Cavs, the city of Cleveland. He brought me maybe the only championship I'm ever going to see in my lifetime. I hope that's not the case, but I still love him as a player. And I remember when he was thinking about leaving the Cavs, first of all, like the first time to go to the Heat, and then the second time we left to go to the Lakers, there were a lot of Cavs fans who were like, oh, I'm tired of this drama that LeBron brings every single year. And trust me, he brings a lot of drama. I don't love everything that LeBron does. He certainly annoys me, and he can be very dramatic at times. But then these fans are like, oh, I'm done with LeBron. I'm ready for him to move on. We're going to be better off without him. How'd that go? How'd that go for the Cavs? Now, Cavs certainly rebuilt themselves into a prouder organization, and might have a chance to make a run in the Eastern Conference playoffs going forward, but they're not the same with LeBron. And I understand that Deuce Knight is not the same guaranteed players like LeBron is. I'm not making that. It's not apples to apples, right? But the fact of the matter is, if you want to get the best guys, sometimes you're going to have to deal with some stuff that you really don't enjoy dealing with, and that is the case with Deuce Knight. I think he's going to go to Auburn, so maybe you'll get your wish if that's what you want, if you want him to move on, so all of this can be over and done with. But I do think that the longer this goes on, Notre Dame still has a slim chance of keeping him. We're going to have to wait and see, and as always, we're going to have you covered here on Locked On Irish whenever he makes a final decision. All right, now let's refocus on the upcoming season and predict who is going to light up the stat sheet. That is next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. As the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Here's my pick for the weekend. How about an anytime home run prop? One of my favorite players ever, Francisco Lindor. He's no longer one of my favorite players ever since he got traded from the team formerly known as the Cleveland Indians, now the Guardians. He is plus 370 to hit a home run tonight when the Mets square off against the Mariners. You know what? Why not? Let's sprinkle a little bit of Francisco Lindor anytime home run action. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Okay, our next mailbag question, or I guess mailbag questions, because our guy at J_Patterson3 has a lot to ask. Okay, first he asks, pick who will lead the team in the following categories: receiving touchdowns, tackles, sacks, and interceptions. I think Jaden Greathouse is going to lead the team in receiving touchdowns. He did last year, and he missed several games. I think that tells you a lot about the type of player that Jaden Greathouse is. And for all the movement, for all the depth in that wide receiver room, I think it's pretty clear that Jaden Greathouse is the clear alpha in that room. Is he going to be like an elite wide receiver one? That remains to be seen. But whenever you hear talk about the wide receivers, Jaden Greathouse is always the first name mentioned. I thought about maybe putting Bo Collins there because he has certainly received a lot of hype so far throughout the summer in camp. I'm going to hold off on that for now, but I also considered maybe putting Mitchell Evans in there. But then I remembered he only had one touchdown last year. Now, granted, he missed pretty much all of November, but still, I thought he'd have a little bit more touchdowns than that. So maybe Jaden Greathouse could run away with it this year. But I think he's the safe pick. He's also my pick to lead the team in receptions, even though Jay Patterson didn't even ask for me to make that prediction in this question. Okay, next up, tackles. Jack Kaiser. That's easy. He's going to be on the field the most. He plays a position that lends itself to getting a lot of tackles. And he's been in the top 3 or 5 in tackles for the past 2 seasons, despite the fact that he has not played nearly as much as the starting linebackers. This year, he's going to be on the field pretty much every single snap, so long as he doesn't get hurt, and he's going to have a great opportunity to really light up the stat sheet. Even though he doesn't play the Mike linebacker, which is traditionally the position that gets the most tackles, I think Jack Kaiser is going to be all over the field making tackles all the time. So he is an easy pick. Sacks is a little bit tougher because, you could have some guys come in like a Boubacar Traore who comes in and they rack up a couple sacks because they're going to be in an obvious passing situation. So when they're out there, they're going to be in the backfield a lot. I think the safe pick here, though, is R.J. Oben. He had 5 sacks last year and 9 in the combined 2 years prior to that. So he has a proven track record of getting after the quarterback. It's a big reason why Notre Dame got him out of the transfer portal when he left Duke. And I think that I considered putting Botello or maybe Traore in there because they play the Viper. That's traditionally the position that gets after the passer most in the Notre Dame defense. I still need to see it to believe it with Jordan Botello. I know that there's a lot of hype around him, and I like it. I think that he's certainly trending in the right direction. It seems like he's doing and saying all the right things, but we've kind of talked about Jordan Botello breaking out for a long time. So for him to lead the team in sacks seems like a bit of a reach, so I'm going to take the safe pick and go R.J. Oben. Interceptions, Xavier Watts had 7 last year. He led the nation in them, and still absurd that he didn't win the Thorpe Award, but he did win the Bronco Nagurski Award. Is he going to be able to do that in back-to-back seasons? That seems like a lot to ask. Normally, it doesn't happen that way, especially now that defenses are way more familiar with Xavier Watts. They're probably going to be going away from him as much as they can, but they're going to have to throw the ball to somebody. And I'm going to take Benjamin Morrison here to lead the team in interceptions. On one hand, you could make the case, well, if he's shutting down the receiver, they're not going to throw to him nearly as much. That might be true. I think that was the case with Cam Hart last year because he really didn't have any interceptions last year, despite the fact that I think he played outstanding football. But when you looked at the stats and the targets at Cam Hart, they just weren't throwing it to him. But they threw to Ben Morrison's side a lot more, and he ended up with 3 interceptions. So I think that's going to happen again this year. Dark horse candidate, this is getting a little crazy. Adon Schuler, maybe, because I think that teams are going to test him when he's on the field because they're going to be throwing away from Morrison or Watts, and it sounds like Adon Schuler has been making all kinds of plays in camp. So that would be my dark horse pick because now that I did it, I realized that I basically took chalk with Greathouse leading the team in receiving touchdowns, Jack Kaiser leading the team in tackles, R.J. Oben in sacks, Benjamin Morrison at interception. So maybe I'll change it at the last second here just for the sake of being a little bit more interesting with Adon Schuler. But I think these are the safe picks, and these are going to end up being the guys that Notre Dame relies upon the most, and they're going to light up the stat sheet this season. Okay, next question. This one comes from @DallasFan in DC1. I'm going to just be honest with you guys. I don't look at the YouTube comments a ton. I do look at them, and I appreciate everyone who engages with the show because I just like that you are watching and you're invested in all of that. But obviously, when I'm looking for mailbag questions, I've got to look in the comments. Sometimes it can be a little bit toxic, especially when opposing fans get in there, and then it can get out of control. Dallas fan in DC has been one of my more vocal critics. I think that's fair to say. I think Dallas fan in DC would even agree with that. But I appreciate the question here because it's a really good one. List Notre Dame's wide receiver room, 6-player rotation, and their traits to watch for. So I think the starting lineup, if Notre Dame were to go out there today, you're going to have Bo Collins at the boundary, you're going to have Chris Mitchell at the field, and Jaden Greathouse in the slot. As for their traits, I think the thing that stands out with Beau Collins is his freakish athletic ability. He made Bruce Feldman's freakless. He's got a really high vertical jump, broad jump. He can jump really far. He's also been categorized as extremely twitchy. So that's something to keep an eye on. He's also 6'3", 205 pounds, so that's good. Chris Mitchell at the field, speed, over-the-top ability. Notre Dame really needs a burner on the outside. I think Chris Mitchell is going to do that for the Irish this year. And then Jaden Greathouse in the slot. I think his best trait is just reliability, right? Notre Dame trusted him last year as a true freshman in the opener, and he scored 2 touchdowns. And I think every time he had to go out there, he made some really good plays. I think his targets to reception rate, he only had like 4. I got to look this up. I'm sorry, this is bad radio, but he only had like 4 times where he was targeted and did not make the catch. So he's really reliable last season. Backing those guys up to round out the 6-man rotation, I think Jaden Thomas is going to be the first guy off the bench at the boundary, or really any of these other positions, because Jaden Thomas can be moved all the way around. And for him, I think his trait is consistency. When he's been healthy, he's been very consistent. I think that's going to happen again this season. Jordan Faison is going to be right there behind Thomas. He could play in the field. He could play in the slot. His elusiveness, man, he's slippery. You saw that on the lacrosse field. You saw that when he was out there making plays on the football field. He is just really tough to catch. He's not the biggest guy, but he's really, really fast, and he's a great athlete. And then speaking of fast, the backup slot, Jaden Harrison, transfer from Marshall. I did not expect him to be as much of a factor in the wide receiver rotation as it appears he is going to be. I thought he was just going to be a kick returner, punt returner specialist. Nope, he's just going to be returning kicks, and he's going to be the backup slot receiver behind Jaden Greathouse. Incredibly fast, incredibly twitchy, incredibly explosive. Really excited to see what he can do on the field this season because Notre Dame needs more guys like that. And then even though Dallas Fan and DC only asked me for 6, I'm going to give them 2 more because I think these guys are going to be a part of the rotation. True freshman, Mikey Gilbert. I don't know his trait just yet. He's just college ready for true freshman, which I think is pretty impressive. That's an impressive trait right now for him. And then Deion Colsey. He's been around a really long time. Actually was a pretty good receiver his freshman year. I thought he'd end up having a really good career. Then came on strong at the end of 2022. Missed basically all of 2023 with an injury, but I think he's going to be the 8th guy in this rotation. The thing is, with Notre Dame wide receivers, really any wide receivers in the entire country, like you can say you want to have a 6-man rotation, but odds are you're going to have to go 8 guys deep because guys get hurt, guys get tired, the season is long. Deion Colsey is going to have to come in and make some plays this season. So that is how I see the wide receiver room shaking out this year. We're going to have to wait and see if any other guys crack into that mix as well. Okay, coming up next, how is Mike Denbrock going to adjust his scheme to make up for Charles Jagusah's injury, if at all? That's next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And with great last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. Whether you've been planning to go to a game for weeks, or if you're feeling spontaneous and you're like, you know what, it's the weekend, let's hit up the nearby ballpark, Gametime is the perfect place for you. It is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy. But my favorite thing about Gametime is the pricing shows your total cost up front, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Okay, we just got a few more questions left to round out the show. This next one comes from @B.Fraley. Given Jagusah's injury, do you think Mike Denbrock goes more 12 personnel than 11 early on? Quick refresher, 12 personnel is a formation that involves 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, and 1 running back. 11 personnel involves 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 running back. But will Denbrock go 12 more than 11 now? Honestly, no. Maybe a little bit more than he initially expected, but not that much because I think he really wants to spread it out. As Pete Sampson from The Athletic pointed out this week, Notre Dame used 2 tight end sets on 36.6% of its offensive snaps last season. That was 15% higher than the national average of 21%. Meanwhile, for comparison's sake, LSU went with 2 tight ends just 5.5% of the time last year under Mike Denbrock. Now, obviously, there's some things to point out. Notre Dame did not have a very good receiver room last year. As a matter of fact, they were very poor at the wide receiver room last season. Meanwhile, LSU had 2 first-rounders in Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. But they did have, and they do have, a really good tight end in Mason Taylor. So the fact that they never wanted to bring in another tight end with Mason Taylor tells you a little bit about what Mike Denbrock wants to do with his offense. Notre Dame has multiple really good tight ends with Mitchell Evans and Eli Raridan. So I do think that he's going to go 12 personnel a little bit more with Notre Dame, but honestly not anywhere close to the 36.6% that Notre Dame ran last season. I understand that you might want to bring in some tight ends to help out the tackles. I get that. But by doing that, you are also inviting more defenders into the box. Whereas if you have more wide receivers split out on the outside, then teams aren't going to stack as many guys in the box. And I think that gives you an advantage as well. You might put your tackle in more one-on-one situations. I get that, but an easy way to counter that would be running more run-pass options. So that way you're making quick decisions to take advantage of whatever the defense is showing you, find the mismatch there, and attack it. I just think that when you bring in 2 tight ends and you split them out wide and you're like, all right, well, now we're giving our tackles help. Well, now the entire offensive line is going to have more guys coming bearing down at them because you have those 2 tight ends, and it's not as much of a risk on the outside. So I think there's certainly pros and cons to either argument, but given what Mike Denbrock has shown he likes to do as an offensive coordinator, Notre Dame is going to try to counter their concerns at the tackle positions, probably by getting the ball out quicker, finding guys in space, and pushing the ball horizontally a little bit more than vertically so that the quarterback can just get rid of the ball as soon as possible. Okay, next one. Clancy, the Notre Dame leprechaun, asks over-under for Notre Dame's turnover ratio, plus 4.5. Clancy, it better be way over. Plus 4.5 is not good. Notre Dame was plus 7 last year in turnover margin. That is a good number. They were in the top 20 in the country. Michigan led the entire country with plus 19. Now, granted, the schedule that they played in September and October was an absolute joke, and I think that that's a big reason why they were able to pad the stats with turnover margin. But still, 4.5 is way too low. We need to hammer the over. And creating turnovers has been something that Al Golden has really emphasized this season for the Notre Dame defense. I think they could get that up to like 10. Now, obviously, the offense has to do its part and not turn the ball over, which I think has been a little bit of an issue in camp so far. But I think that also has to do with the fact that Notre Dame's defense is being so aggressive. They do drills where they're really punching the ball out. They're going for picks. They're being really aggressive. So I think that Notre Dame is going to have a much higher turnover ratio than that. I really hope that they can get into double digits this year. That would probably put them top 10 in the country. And the more turnovers you gain, that is going to drastically help your chances of winning football games. It's going to be especially important in that first game against Texas A&M. I honestly think that the game could come down to whoever turns the ball over less. So that is going to be something to watch out for. Okay, Vander Skills. Have you heard anything official as far as color coordinating the crowd for any home games? I'm attending the Louisville game and read that it was possibly going to be a green out. Just want to make sure I'm representing properly. I have not heard anything official about any sort of Irish Roar green or anything like that. Maybe I missed something, but I don't think I have. I looked it up. I definitely could see Notre Dame doing some sort of color-coordinated thing. Usually when they do that, they wear green. I think they'd probably do it for the Florida State game. The Louisville game is going to be on Peacock, so would they really want to do a green out if the game is not even going to be on national television? I don't know. I don't even know if that really has that much to do with their decision there, but I think it might, right? Like if you want to have a cool greened out crowd, you'd probably do it during one of the marquee games of the year. And even though Louisville is certainly going to be a tough opponent, it's not going to have the television audience because it's on Peacock. I will actually be at that game though. Very excited about that. And I'm going to be at the Texas A&M game, which I'm just to be honest with you, I'm excited, obviously, to go watch Notre Dame and see a bunch of my friends who I went to Notre Dame with and take in the game in person. But I'm not going to lie to you, man. I'm really, really nervous. And considering the last Notre Dame game I went to was the Ohio State game last year, I think that there's still some PTSD that I'm dealing with. And I was also at the Georgia game on the road a few years ago. And as awesome as that environment was, that painful feeling of walking out of that stadium, listening to all the Georgia fans barking, even though the Georgia fans could not have been nicer to Notre Dame fans that weekend, like that is just not fun leaving a game, watching Notre Dame lose, and then hearing 100,000 screaming fans cheering on their team who just beat Notre Dame. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But again, I do have some pessimistic tendencies. I apologize for that. Okay, last one. Sean Ambrose. Who do you see as the rush ends? Also, is the Notre Dame defensive playbook wrong on EA College Football 25? Are they a 4-2-5 or a 4-3? Okay, Sean, I think when you're playing the game, you're just getting a little bit confused here because the 4-3 defense is the first thing that shows up. 4-2-5 is in there. They just call it nickel because that's what it is. But the game does not refer to it as a 4-2-5. Notre Dame is going to run 4-2-5 probably more than they run the 4-3 this season because more teams play more wide receivers. You need another corner to match that. So even though their base still might technically be considered a 4-3, that's a more traditional defense. I mean, I think you could go either way. The fact of the matter is, Sean, you can play as both 4-2-5 or 4-3 in the Notre Dame defense on the video game. As for the rush ends, it's going to be Botello and R.J. Oben. I thought maybe Boubacar Traore could beat out Botello. Don't see that happening. And even though Josh Burnham has made a really strong move in preseason camp, ultimately R.J. Oben is going to believe the starter. Or at least that's the way I see it. But that is all the time we have today. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to every question. I promise the next time I do a mailbag, I will get to those. But that is going to do it for this episode. That's another week of Locked On Irish in the books. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'm going to be back with you early next week, and by that point, it'll be just 2 weeks and some change, kind of like fudging the numbers there a little bit. It's going to be closer to 3 weeks, but still, I cannot wait for the season opener. For your second listen, check out the Locked On College Football Podcast with host Spencer McLaughlin. He does a great job covering the sport as a whole. I'm hoping to join him soon on the show, so check that out. Also, in the meantime, remember to subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.